Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. We have a special breakdown covering each and every one of these cycles that we've been experiencing going back the last few years. We've seen that every single time the S&P 500 makes a new all-time high, it's right before Bitcoin ends up doing the same thing, and we just had the S&P 500 make a new high yesterday. So as we're seeing new all-time highs across the board in stocks, this is the same moment of time where we're expecting crypto to do the same thing, and I have a few charts that I know are going to blow your guys' minds today because they're going to perfectly show exactly what's taking place in today's market and how we're just at the very beginning of the most bullish part of this bull run. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are to start off today's video, taking a look at the stock market. We're also going to be looking at a few other charts real quickly, but we need to start out by this comparison because this is going to take us into our next chart. Now guys, as you can see, we had just made a new all-time high in the S&P 500. The Dow Jones and the Nasdaq have already done so. So now that the S&P 500 is doing it, it pretty much just brings all confidence back into the market because, you know, the S&P 500 is known as being a little bit more risk-on type of investment. So when we're looking at this, we have to understand that if this is making a new all-time high, then Bitcoin, being viewed as probably the riskiest investment, is going to end up following it very soon. And historically, that's what we've seen. If we come over here, every one of these yellow lines marks the point where we've had one of these major corrections, and then we went into a new all-time high. Even though this one corrected back down a little bit, this was still the point where we made the new all-time high. And then we've gone ahead and drawn a point every single time. Now, the next one that we drew was right after this COVID capitulation, when we made the fresh all-time high here. And then the next one we're going to be looking at is right here today and how it factors in with Bitcoin. So when we come over here and look at the Bitcoin against the S&P 500 index, we are looking at every one of these yellow lines being the exact same moment of time on these charts. If you guys notice that every single time the S&P 500 makes a new all-time high, we end up seeing Bitcoin pretty much at that mid-range of its cycle before it also does the same exact thing. We can come over here and look at even our last bull market, where the moment the S&P 500 went into a new all-time high was pretty much that last moment before Bitcoin also did the same thing. And now where we're at today, we're sitting right at that mid-cycle range. You know, we just had the S&P 500 go into a brand new all-time high. Historically speaking, when we've seen prior cycles, this has always taken place before we also end up doing the same thing. So I don't find it coincidental that we're seeing the markets looking really bullish. A lot of them are breaking out and making big moves over the last couple months with Bitcoin. And I do believe that this is only the beginning of this to happen. Now, there was another pattern that I noticed in here that I think is very important for you guys to understand, and that's the Bitcoin halvings. Where are the Bitcoin halvings around the same point of the S&P 500, and which one is more correlated? Are we going up into a new all-time high because of the S&P 500, or is it because of the Bitcoin halvings that it's happening? Well, if we come over here and look at the Bitcoin halving in 2016, it was almost at the exact same day of the S&P 500 going into a new all-time high, and I thought that that was really interesting. And then if we came over here and looked at our most recent cycle that we went through, our Bitcoin halving was May 10th, so if we draw a line on the 11th, which is the only time I can get it, notice how close both of these moments were, where the halving and the S&P 500 going into a new all-time high are actually happening almost at the exact same moment of time. Both of these were a little bit further apart, but this is only a couple months difference, and I think that that's really important to understand, considering where we're at. We're only like 3 months away from our next Bitcoin halving. You know, we're about the exact same sort of gap as what we saw in that last cycle. And I do believe that, you know, historically speaking, if we look at what has happened when the S&P 500 has gone into a new all-time high after a major correction, we're looking at Bitcoin, you know, basically doing the same thing. Both of these are happening right at the time of the Bitcoin halving. I find it just super interesting that they're all lining up at the same time. For me, I don't think that the Bitcoin halving really drives anything anymore, considering most of the Bitcoin supply is already mined. It really is obsolete at this point how much new inflation is entering the market, because it just really doesn't even impact anything. It really has absolutely no effect on the market aside from a narrative that people buy around. So I think that it has more to do with just people getting excited about the halving more than it does with the halving itself, considering if we're looking at the S&P 500 going into the new all-time high, I think that that has more to do with Bitcoin going into a new all-time high than the halving does. I think that in the olden days of Bitcoin, 2012, 2013, 14, during those periods, during the first halving and even before that, that was where the halvings actually meant something. Whereas now today, they really just don't mean anything. It's almost no amount that's being inflated into the supply. So I think that what we're looking at right here is mainly the cause and effect of Bitcoin following the rest of the markets. The rest of the liquidity is happening from the dollar, trickling back into the rest of the stock market, and then that goes into Bitcoin, and we're all just the slave of the dollar's liquidity. So at the end of the day, as the S&P 500 is making a fresh new all-time high, I think that Bitcoin is pretty close, to doing the same thing, and historically speaking, that's pretty much right where we're at, is that point of the halving. Then that's what the next move is, to go into those new all-time highs. So we got to be prepared for that. Now, the next chart I wanted to talk about here is one that's really going to blow your guys' minds, because this is going to perfectly explain what the altcoins are doing right now. Now, one thing we've talked a lot about recently are Wyckoff accumulations, and Wyckoffs are going to be super important considering we have a few different schematics that they follow. One of them ends up following more along the Wall Street cheat sheet, where you actually see 3 lower lows. Lower low here, lower low there, and then we get one final one right here. This is your normal Wyckoff, and we've actually seen a lot of altcoins do this. MetaSTAO was one that did this type of a Wyckoff before making that huge breakout that we just saw. And so they're all going to do a variance of it, but the total altcoin market cap is actually following the Wyckoff schematic number 2. And this is the other example where instead of us making 3 lower lows, we make 2 of them. And then this one just kind of holds support in the mid-range before we get that breakout and reversal. And if you guys notice, when we're comparing all of these cycles, it's very similar to what we're seeing today. We have the sell-off, and then we find support down in here. We make this little bounce, pretty much draw that right there. And then we make one more final high above that. That's pretty much this move here. And then we correct all the way back down. This one doesn't technically make a lower low, but it just retests that support. Pretty much the same thing here. And then you guys notice that we get the bounce back up, get close to the very top of the range, but top just below it. And if you guys notice, that's the same thing that happened here. Just below that range before we topped. And then we start this A, B, and C correction. A, B, and C correction. And then we've just broken out. So all we're at right now is the point of the breakout. I don't think that there's really any difference. The worst case scenario that could happen is this ends up pulling back down to retest this level again. I don't think it's going to get any worse than that. And most likely this would end up holding support somewhere inside of this range. Considering we've already retested it like 4 times right there. We retested it twice inside of this big sell-off here. I just don't think that, if we're not breaking down yet, we're probably not going to. And this is a breakout of a very, very big range. Considering time frames from the very peak low to the point of us breaking out, you're looking at about 537 days of an accumulation. Ethereum in the last cycle spent about that exact same amount of time from peak low to peak low after COVID, when we were watching that whole cycle play out. And then when ETH actually broke out of it was about $300. It rallied up to like 400 and then pulled back to like 350 and consolidated. It was that same point as, we're pretty much at right here, where we had just broken out of a big long-term bottom formation. Now comes the point where I think a lot of people are getting really, happy profit taking. They're taking a lot of heavy profits so early into this move, when I just want to continue to teach you guys that the best thing we can do right now is focus on the long term. The only thing that you're going to do right now is cost yourself a lot of long-term profit by thinking you're some trading expert, by thinking you're somehow going to compound all these gains to the moon, when realistically the people that make the most money are the ones that have, the best ability to just have patience and hold the long-term trend. They see their altcoins go up and they're up 50x, they keep holding. They see them go up 100x, they keep holding. And there is a certain extent where you have to learn from those mistakes. You can't just hold forever and be the idiot that never takes profits, because that's just as stupid, if not more stupid, than the guy that takes profits too early. I would argue it's more stupid than the guy that takes profits too early. The best thing you can do is take profits, but we have to understand the long-term trend. Do we take profits right after we broke out of a 537-day range, or do we take profits once the market's actually kind of broken out and gone into a new all-time high, right? At the end of the day, nobody really knows where the true top is going to be. Nobody really knows how high the cycle is going to go. But I can tell you guys right now, I am definitely not taking profits after we just flipped our bottom formation of our bear market. This is the whole point that we've been accumulating for. Like, at this point, all we really should be doing is holding. Like, there's absolutely nothing else we should be doing besides holding. And that's what I find so interesting, is the psychology of the market cycle, right? Which is kind of why I actually brought up this chart down in here. If we notice how once we bottom, we start this disbelief phase, and it's where we just begin the new uptrend, and it's pretty much exactly where we're at today. We just began this new uptrend. We're in the disbelief phase. A lot of people are thinking that this is a sucker's rally. They're taking profits into it. I think that that's why we're seeing a lot of heavy selling inside of this, because all we've done is maintain an ascending support the whole way through, right? We're still maintaining that even now. So there's a lot of people that are selling upon this uptrend when all we've ever done is continue to maintain that uptrend. So if we're going to see this thing continue to break out, we're expecting it to go into a new all-time high. So like I said, guys, as we're seeing this disbelief phase playing out, you got to look and keep in mind that this happens twice on this chart. The disbelief phase happens before the entire parabolic cycle. So we're at the very, very beginning, the very start of all of this for the most part. Even if you didn't buy the bottoms down in here, you're just barely buying now, you're still early. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I think we're all about to make a lot of money, but it's the people that are willing to hold the whole cycle, focus on the long term. They're the ones that actually make the profit. That's how I made most of my profit. If I think about what I made the most money on long term in the last cycle, a lot of that stuff I was down 50, 60, 70, 80+% on, only for them to go up 100x because of the fact I just continued to hold and I didn't take profits on a lot of it. It helped because I only put like $500 in some of the different things. And so like for me it was, well, it's a moon bag, like I'm just going to see what it turns into. But with that being said, a lot of those altcoins I ended up buying, held on to an 80% loss. Telcoin was a good example of that. It dropped 80%. I held it for like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. It bounced back up to my break even. I took my profit because I broke even because I wanted to move on to something else. And it went up like 200 or 300x from that point. And so I look at that, and I did that a few different times in the last cycle. I bought Solana at 60 cents and sold it at a few X. I bought Phantom super early and sold the majority of that at 20 and then all of it at 40x. I bought Terra Luna and did the same thing because they both rallied with Phantom. I ended up selling it at 20 and 40x. I ended up keeping a tiny amount, but they ended up going up another 100x from that point even. So that's why I continue to say focus on the long-term cycle. That's going to be the most profitable thing you're going to be able to do. We still have 2 years to go inside of this bull run. We're not taking profits until the end of the year 2025. So the only thing that we're going to do right now is get too greedy, taking profits, and then, a couple years from now, you're just going to be really upset with yourself looking back, knowing how much more money you would have had you have just had patience to hold the long-term trend. Historically speaking, if the S&P 500 is going into a new all-time high, it has also marked the point when Bitcoin against the S&P 500 pretty much does the same thing. Both of these points also converge with the Bitcoin halvings, which shows that, ultimately we are at the point of a reversal. We are at the point of the ending of this consolidation. I think that now comes the real upside in the cycle. Whether we make one more low down in here before, making that new move, I don't care. I hope we get a lower low, because as somebody who understands the long-term trend, that's the only thing that matters, is me getting more buy opportunities and getting more time to accumulate. Even if you don't have any money, the more time that Bitcoin spends correcting, the stronger the foundation of support is that we can build a much bigger impulse and parabolic move into the cycle. That, to me, is what's most important, because that's what makes us the most money. If we just instantly saw Bitcoin teleport to a new all-time high, there would be too much profit taking for that to sustain itself, and it would be very similar to what we saw right over in here, in my opinion. What we could do is base out, build a real solid area of support before that move into a new all-time high. And I do think that we're, pretty much at the last line of defense for the bears before we do finally make that move. So I wanted to give you guys this update, break things down, share with you guys all the charts that I think are most important right now, viewing the macro, understanding that where we're at right now and historically speaking, all we can do is hold, and that's how we're going to make the most money. We don't want to try and overcomplicate things, and I want to continue to preach that to you guys as somebody who has cost myself a lot of long-term profit, but I've also made a lot of profit just holding the long-term trends as well. You're going to make mistakes, but as somebody who's actually been able to do it successfully, knowing what I know now going into my third cycle, that's my big takeaway. Just hold what you guys have. I think that that's the best strategy we can do. The only way you're going to screw it up is if you just don't take profits at all, but I don't think you can go wrong holding for the next couple years before you end up doing so. So thank you guys. If you guys do want to see how I'm investing over these cycles, any markets I'm buying, selling, trading, anything like that, you guys can actually sign up on my website to get access to my Discord server. So links are in the description to go ahead and join my website. From there, you're going to get total access to the Discord, anything I'm doing with my money, trading, selling, any markets I'm moving into outside of crypto, literally anything I'm doing long term. That's where I post everything. You guys can actually message me, ask me any questions that you want, and I will be there to actually support you guys through the cycle. So check it out. Links are in the description. And with that being said, I will catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.